I used to think loyalty paid until it handed me my own termination letter. My name's Noah Keaton. I'm 28, and for 5 years I gave everything to Grayson Holdings nights, weekends, even birthdays. My boss, Elliot Grayson, called me his right hand. I thought that meant family. Turns out it meant fall guy. At the company's annual gala, under chandeliers worth more than my student debt, Elliot raised his glass and said, "Let's toast to the man who made this year possible." I smiled until he turned to someone else. My badge buzzed red. My email went dark. The applause wasn't for me. It was my replacement's welcome party. I packed my desk in silence, trying not to shake. That's when I saw it, a sealed envelope with my name, from MK, my late uncle's initials. Inside, a torn bank statement tied to a hidden account under Grayson Holdings, but owned by Martin Keaton, my uncle. And in that moment, humiliation turned into something sharper and more purposeful. If this story caught your heart, make sure to hit subscribe so we keep bringing you stories that dig deep into truth, guilt, and redemption. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We read everyone. He smiled like he owned my soul, and maybe he did. The next morning, I walked into Grayson Holdings like a ghost in daylight. The marble floors still gleamed. The air smelled of coffee and power, but every step felt like I was walking through something that used to belong to me. My desk was gone, my ID card deactivated, my name already replaced on the company roster. I didn't plan to confront Elliot that day, but humiliation can turn silence into fire. His office door was open, sunlight spilling across the glass desk where he sat, feet up, scrolling through his phone like nothing in the world could touch him. When he saw me, his grin widened, practiced and poisonous. "Noah, you're still here?" I placed the bank statement on his desk. The one with my uncle's name on it? The numbers didn't lie, and neither did the dates. Why is Martin Keaton's account tied to Grayson Holdings? He didn't even flinch, just a lazy shrug. Martin was generous, he said. Don't let ghosts confuse you. Generous? You mean dead. You mean robbed. He laughed, a sound so smug it made my skin crawl. You always were sentimental. That's why you'll never run anything that matters. You stole from him. He leaned forward, lowering his voice until it felt like a whisper aimed at my spine. And what are you going to do about it? The city skyline shimmered behind him. Towers of glass built from lies and stolen credit. Go home, Noah, he said softly, before you embarrass yourself more. I turned to leave, but then I saw it, the framed company photo on the wall. My uncle, smiling beside him, both standing behind a bronze plaque that read, Founders of Grayson Holdings. Except the plaque wasn't whole. The initials MK had been scratched out, carved away with something sharp. History erased in plain sight. I walked out without another word, but my hands were shaking. Not from fear, from clarity. If Elliot Grayson thought he could bury my uncle's name under his empire, he had no idea what kind of ghost he'd just awakened. If this story caught your heart, make sure to hit subscribe so we keep bringing you stories that dig deep into truth, guilt, and redemption. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We read them all, and your words keep us going. Numbers don't lie, people do. The next day, office felt colder. Not because of the air conditioning, but because I'd started looking at it differently. Every cubicle looked like a ledger of someone's silence. Every smile a line item paid for in loyalty. I had one thing left to check, the payroll. Grayson Holdings was supposed to be clean, transparent, successful. But the numbers didn't add up. Bonuses that never reached the employees. Balances that shifted right before audits. And somewhere in those digits, my uncle's ghost waited. I slipped into the records room after hours. The place smelled like paper dust and secrets. Old filing cabinets hummed under the flickering lights. In the far corner, I found a forgotten shelf labeled 2002-2010 Microfilm Archive. I almost laughed. Nobody uses microfilm anymore. Nobody except someone trying to hide the truth in plain sight. I loaded one of the reels into the reader. The film crackled like it didn't want to wake up. Line after line scrolled past rows of names, pay stubs dates. Then one caught my eye. Tiny deposits missing from payroll accounts every month siphoned to a single offshore number. Cayman Islands. The dates stretched back more than a decade. I kept scrolling until I saw a memo note typed beside one of the larger transfers. For the liquidation of Keaton Trust. My heart pounded. Keaton, my uncle's name. Liquidation meant something final, something dead. The hum of the machine grew louder in my ears until it sounded like a heartbeat. I printed the page and held it under the fluorescent light. The ink shimmered faintly with a thin ghost of truth bleeding through. Someone had been draining my uncle's trust long before his death, and they'd used the payroll to do it quietly, one paycheck at a time. Outside the window, the city lights blurred through the glass, turning into streaks of gold and white. For the first time, I saw what this company really was, a machine that fed on the forgotten. I folded the paper, slipped it inside my jacket, and turned off the light. If this story caught your make sure to hit subscribe so we keep bringing you stories that dig deep into truth, guilt, and redemption. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from, we can read them all, and your words keep us going. The dead don't need lawyers unless the living owe them something. I found Joan Wexler's address in an old company directory buried inside the HR archives. She'd been Grayson Holdings' first corporate attorney back when the firm was still just two men in a borrowed office in Chicago. My uncle and Elliot. Partners before power turned into possession. Her house sat on the edge of town. A one-story bungalow with ivy climbing its windows and wind chimes that sounded like regret. She answered the door with cautious eyes that softened when I said my name. "You're Martin's nephew, aren't you?" she asked. I nodded. "He trusted you once." Inside her living room, papers were stacked in neat towers next to a briefcase so worn it looked older than me. I told her about the payroll records, the missing trust, the scratched-out initials. She listened without interrupting, her thumb rubbing the edge of her teacup like she was weighing what truth cost to tell. When I finished, she sighed. Martin always said the company would eat itself one day. He left a safeguard in case it did. What kind of safeguard? She opened the old briefcase and pulled out a yellowed envelope taped to the lid. Inside was a single page handwritten in blue IN, the edges taped to a legal codicil form. This, she said, was his clause. I read the words slowly, trying to breathe between the lines. If any evidence of foul play or intentional fraud is found within Grayson Holdings, the rightful heir of Martin Keaton shall inherit his estate and all assets tied to the founding agreement. It was signed by both founders, dated the same week my uncle supposedly transferred his shares to Elliot. "So he didn't sell them," I whispered. "He protected them." Joan nodded. "And protected you." I sank back into the couch, the paper trembling in my hands. "Why didn't you come forward?" She looked at the window light fading behind lace curtains. "Because Elliot made sure I forgot. Bought out my silence under the guise of retirement. But I kept the clause. Couldn't destroy it. Some debts follow you home." She placed a wrinkled hand on mine. "If that clause is real," she said quietly, "you already own the company. You just don't know it yet. If this story caught your heart, make sure to hit subscribe so we keep bringing you stories that dig deep into truth, guilt, and redemption. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We read them all, and your words keep us going. Truth doesn't hide. It waits. For the first time, I stepped into my uncle's apartment after his death. Didn't smell like grief. It smelled like old paper and silence that had been sitting too long, the kind that waits for someone brave enough to disturb it. The place was small, barely 2 rooms and a narrow kitchen that looked untouched since the day he'd died. This email is still piled by the door. Utilities are long overdue. But I wasn't there to clean. I was there to understand why a man who once built an empire had died alone in a rented apartment. I started with his desk, the same oak one he'd used since my childhood, the same one he used to tell me stories about honor and partnership. The drawers groaned when I pulled them open, stuffed with receipts, letters, and unpaid bills. Nothing unusual until I noticed the back panel didn't sit flush against the frame. I tapped it. Hollow. A thin screwdriver from the kitchen drawer was all it took. The panel loosened, revealing a small leather-bound journal wedged inside, covered in dust and the faint smell of smoke. My heart stuttered. I recognized his handwriting, looping M's and careful lines. I opened the first page. Elliot is moving funds again. Says it's for expansion. It's theft. He knows I know. Page after page told the story I'd never been meant to read. How Elliot had siphoned money from the company disguised as consulting fees. How Martin confronted him, and how the arguments grew uglier with each passing week. Then came the entry that stopped my breath. He said accidents happen to people who can't stay quiet. I gripped the edges of the journal until the leather creaked. The words blurred for a moment as anger and disbelief collided. My uncle hadn't died in an accident. He'd been erased like his initials on that plaque. I turned to the final page. Half the paper was torn out, but the last surviving line was written in darker ink as if pressed in a hurry. Account access code, hidden in plain sight. My pulse quickened. Hidden in plain sight. I looked around the apartment again, suddenly noticing details I'd missed. Framed photos, certificates, and a shelf of old company memorabilia. Somewhere in here, he'd left the key. I held the journal to my chest, the weight of truth heavier than the leather it was bound in. The betrayal wasn't history anymore. It was evidence. And the man who thought he'd buried his crimes was about to learn that the dead don't stay quiet when their story is unfinished. If this story caught your heart, make sure to hit subscribe so we keep bringing you stories that dig deep into truth, guilt, and redemption. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Wed them all, and your words keep us going. Art doesn't just decorate it, but also commemorates. I'd seen that painting 100 times before. It hung behind Elliot's desk like a trophy. A sweeping oil landscape of the Grayson Holdings headquarters, sunlight glinting off glass towers, workers painted as tiny strokes of ambition. But now, after reading my uncle's journal, it didn't look like art. It looked like a message, hidden in plain sight. My pulse raced as I replayed those words in my head. I zoomed in on an old photo of the office gala from my phone, Elliot posing proudly with the same painting behind him. The brushstrokes weren't random. In one section, near the corner of the canvas, I noticed faint patterns of numbers disguised as architectural details, the kind you wouldn't see unless you were looking for them. I needed to see it in person. That night, I walked back into the office using my old security badge. The cleaning crew had already gone home. Only the hum of the elevators and the flicker of the lobby light kept me company. Elliot's office door stood like a vault at the end of the hall. My hand trembled as I keyed in the old passcode. It still worked. Inside, the room smelled of cologne and expensive deceit. The painting loomed above his leather chair, larger than I remembered, its gold frame polished like a mirror. I stepped closer. Under the glow of my phone's flashlight, the strokes revealed their secret. Tiny impressions, layered in dark varnish, not random brushwork, but coordinates, numerical clusters painted into the windows of the building. I pulled out my phone and started photographing the pattern, cross-referencing the digits with the journal. A code began to emerge, account numbers, dates, and even transfer sequences. The kind of information only founders would know. My breath caught when the reflection shifted. In the glass wall behind me, a shadow moved. The office door clicked shut. "Looking for inspiration, Noah?" Elliot's voice. Smooth, low, and venomous. I froze, the phone still raised in my hand. He stepped out from the dark corner of the room, jacket off, tie loosened, eyes sharp with something between anger and amusement. "Did you really think," he said, circling me slowly, "that a painting could tell you more than I already erased?" I didn't answer. I just kept my camera pointed at the painting. He smiled. "You know, Martin said the same thing. Right before he fell down those stairs." The air left my lungs. My grip tightened on the phone. "Careful," he added softly. "You might end up another sentimental fool." He reached for the phone. I stepped back. My heel hit the chair. The camera flash went off, and for a split second, the entire wall lit up, the hidden code shining like gold through the paint. Elliot lunged forward. If this story caught your heart, make sure to hit subscribe so we keep bringing you stories that dig deep into truth, guilt, and redemption. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We read them all, and your words keep us going. Contracts speak louder than screams. The morning after Elliot caught me in his office, I woke to the sound of my phone vibrating non-stop. 6 missed calls. 3 emails from the company's legal department. 1 from Elliot himself. Cease. Corporate espionage. Immediate termination pending investigation. He didn't even bother to spell my name right. By noon, I was sitting across from my friend Marissa in a cramped cafe downtown. She worked compliance for a rival firm, sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued. She skimmed through the legal thread on my phone and smirked. Classic intimidation play. He's trying to make you fold before you realize what you're holding. I slid the photo of the painting across the table. Then help me understand what I'm holding. She zoomed in, her fingers tracing the coded numbers within the brushstrokes. These aren't random. Look, see the sequence? It's an encrypted ledger. Corporate lawyers used to hide black budget transfers inside NDA frameworks to avoid audits. Every number corresponds to a section in an old non-disclosure clause. I blinked. So he didn't just hide money. He hid people's silence. Marissa nodded, pulling up a decryption program on her laptop. If your uncle was documenting Elliot's moves, this code probably leads to the payout files for the hush fund the people he paid to stay quiet after Martin's death. We fed the sequence into the program, cross-referencing the journal dates and payroll microfilm. Line by line, the digital wall cracked open. A document surfaced. NDA Keaton. PDF. Marissa's eyes widened. This was notarized 3 days after your uncle's funeral. I leaned closer. The contract listed multiple signatories, Elliot's 2 board members, and a forged mark under the name M. Keaton. The payout section referenced a Swiss account under Grayson Holdings and one damning line at the bottom. Account MK01. Ownership transfer pending death certificate. My breath caught. It wasn't just blackmail money. It was the original account of the company's founding capital, programmed to transfer to Elliot only after my uncle's death certificate was filed. Marissa looked at me, her voice low. He didn't steal your uncle's company after he died. He made sure he died so he could steal it. For a moment, everything inside me went silent. Not fear, not anger, just the realization that justice wasn't about revenge anymore. It was arithmetic. He'd written my uncle's death into a contract. I closed the laptop, my reflection flashing across the screen. Then it's time to void the silence clause. If this story caught your heart, make sure to hit subscribe so we keep bringing you stories that dig deep into truth, guilt, and redemption. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We read them all, and your words keep us going. Some vaults hold money, others hold murder. The bank's marble floors looked too clean for the kind of crime I was chasing. Everything gleamed. Glass walls, polished brass counters, even the fake smiles of the tellers. But the name on the door, Harrison and Federal, was the same one stamped across every account in the encrypted files Marissa helped me decode. I walked up to the reception desk, holding my breath like I was smuggling truth in my lungs. "I'm looking for information on a closed account," I said. "Keaton Trust, MK01. The teller blinked. "That's restricted, sir." "Then get someone who remembers when it wasn't." Minutes later, an older man in a gray suit appeared. Thinning hair, gold pen, the kind of presence that still carried the weight of authority. His badge read Alan Mercer, Senior Account Manager. When he heard my name, his expression shifted. "You're Martin Keaton's nephew." The way he said it wasn't surprise, it was guilt. He led me to a small office tucked in the corner of the bank, closed the door, and lowered his voice. "Your uncle was one of our oldest clients. He trusted this place too much. What happened to his account?" I asked. Mercer sighed, glancing toward the frosted glass wall. After his passing, the account was sealed. Not closed, sealed. Executive override. Only one person could authorize that at the time. Who? He hesitated, then reached into his drawer, pulling out a small plastic card, aged, burned slightly at the corner, like someone had tried to destroy it. The logo was faded, but the name below it made my pulse spike. Elliot Grayson, Executive Access. "This was left in our records," Mercer said quietly. "He came in 2 days before your uncle's accident. Said he was updating the file for insurance purposes. I didn't question it. I should have. The walls felt smaller suddenly. The air is too still. 2 days. Elliot had already planned the transfer before Martin was dead." Mercer continued, voice cracking. "Your uncle came in the next morning. He wanted to check the account himself. I told him about the override, but when I offered to show him the paperwork, he just smiled, sad, like he already knew. Said, "Don't worry, Alan, the truth's in the vault. Just not the kind you keep here." He pushed the charred access card toward me. That's all I have left of it. I stared at the plastic, feeling the ghosts of both men hovering over it, one trying to protect his legacy, the other bearing it under signatures and seals. "Can I get a copy of the log?" I asked. Mercer nodded slowly, typing into the terminal. A soft beep filled the silence as the printer came to life. When the page slid out, I saw it immediately. Executive Override. Signed, Elliot Grayson. Date: 2 days before death certificate filed. If this story caught your heart, make sure to hit subscribe so we keep bringing you stories that dig deep into truth, guilt, and redemption. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We read them all. And your words keep us going. Even death leaves paperwork. The funeral home smelled like lilies and bleach, the same combination I remembered from Uncle Martin's service. But this time I wasn't here to mourn. I was here to audit. The receptionist, a quiet woman with soft gray hair, looked up as I approached. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for billing records from Martin Keaton's funeral," I said, keeping my voice calm. "He was buried through this branch 5 years ago." She hesitated, typing into her computer. "I'm sorry, those archives are restricted to immediate family." "I am family," I said. "His nephew. And I think someone used his death to commit a crime." That got her attention. 10 minutes later, I was sitting in a small records room surrounded by dusty boxes labeled with names and dates, forgotten goodbyes, neatly filed. When she returned, she handed me a single invoice in a plastic sleeve. Invoice: Keaton, Martin. Payment source: Grayson Holdings Corporate Expense Fund. Corporate expense. Not family, not personal. The same company that Elliot controlled. My throat tightened as I turned the paper over and found more. Funeral coordination, medical transport, and coroner's consultation fee. Each line item was paid directly from a business account, not the estate. Elliot had billed my uncle's death to the company like it was just another transaction. Then I noticed something odd. The faint outline of typing pressed through the back of the page like someone had carbon copied a message behind it. I held it up to the light. Letters appeared, faint but legible. Pending transfer to next of kin. N.K., my initials. Noah Keaton. A chill ran through me. He hadn't erased me. He'd used my name, my inheritance, the company, the trust. Maybe even my uncle's final assets were routed through me, without me ever knowing. Elliot had needed a legal heir on paper to validate the death transfer. I was his loophole. Rage burned slow and deep. I thought of the silence clause, the forged override, the burned access card, every thread pulling tighter around one truth. Elliot hadn't just stolen the company. He'd rewritten its bloodline. I folded the invoice, slipped it into my jacket, and walked out into the pale evening light. The street outside felt colder now, the kind of chill that only truth brings. If this story caught your heart, make sure to hit subscribe so we keep bringing you stories that dig deep into truth, guilt, and redemption. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We read them all, and your words keep us going. He tried to erase history, but history had a backup. By the time I reached Marissa's apartment, I was running on adrenaline and caffeine. She'd already cleared her dining table and set up 2 laptops, multiple hard drives, and more cables than I'd seen outside a server room. She didn't even look up when I walked in. "You weren't exaggerating," she said. "Your uncle's digital records are a Mazi half encrypted, half deleted. Can you find anything left?" I asked, pulling the funeral invoice from my jacket. Because now I know he used me as a legal proxy. And if he did that once, he's done worse. Marissa nodded. "I pulled the server backup from the company's pre-incident storage, the same week your uncle died. It's corrupted, but there's something labeled COM Archive. Keaton Grayson. Looks like voicemail data." My pulse quickened. "Play it." She hit a few keys. Static filled the room with white noise and faint voices bleeding through. Then, clear as day, my uncle's voice broke the silence. "Elliot, I know what you did." A pause. Then Elliot's smooth, controlled tone. "Martin, don't do this. You'll ruin everything we built." We. My uncle's voice cracked. You forged my signature, drained our accounts, and called it a partnership. I'm going to the board. Martin, Elliot said coldly, think about your nephew. You don't want him involved in this. Silence. Then my uncle again, softer this time. If you touch him, static burst, drowning the rest. Marissa adjusted the filters, rewinding slightly. The final seconds came through. A car engine, wind, the sound of tires screeching. And then, faintly, my uncle's voice trembling, if I die, Noah gets everything. The file ended there. For a long moment neither of us spoke. The room was silent except for the hum of the hard drives, like a machine mourning what it had just revealed. Marissa exhaled. He knew Noah. He knew what was coming. I couldn't move. My hands clenched so tightly my knuckles went white. He tried to protect me, and Elliot used that to take it all. I thought about the funeral invoice, the override, the silence clause, every piece now aligning like gears in a cruel machine. My uncle hadn't just been killed. He'd been deleted, systematically, from history, except for this one voicemail the servers had forgotten to erase. I looked at the waveform still pulsing on the screen, his last words frozen in digital amber. If I die, Noah gets everything. I'm going to make sure that happens, I said quietly. Every word, every cent, every truth. Marissa glanced at me. Then you'll need to go public. I nodded. And I'll need to start where it all began, at the company. If this story caught your heart, make sure to hit subscribe so we keep bringing you stories that dig deep into truth, guilt, and redemption. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We read them all, and your words keep us going. The same table where he fired me, now it was his trial. The boardroom smelled like polished wood, old money, and hypocrisy. The same long mahogany table where Elliot had once told me I lacked vision was now surrounded by the same executives who'd applauded when he took my uncle's company. But this time I wasn't an employee. I was the storm they didn't see coming. Marissa's voice whispered through my earpiece, steady and sharp. You're live in 3, 2, 1. The board members didn't recognize me right away. My badge read Consultant, Audit Division. My suit was clean, my expression calm. Elliot sat at the head of the table, confident as ever, sipping coffee like a man who'd already won. He looked up. Mr. Collins, was it? You had something to present? I nodded, connecting my laptop to the screen behind him. Yes, Mr. Grayson, just a small discovery in the company archives, something about inheritance clauses and offshore transfers. The projector hummed. Then, instead of spreadsheets, the screen flickered to life with a familiar waveform. Marissa's voice came again in my ear. Playing file, com archive, Keaton, Grayson. Elliot froze. The static hit first, then my uncle's voice filled the room. Elliot, I know what you did. You forged my signature. You stole from us. A murmur rippled through the board. Someone whispered, "Is that Martin Keaton?" Elliot shot up, panic cracking through his charm. "Turn that off." But the audio kept rolling. Every word, every threat, every betrayal. And then, my uncle's final line. If I die, Noah gets everything. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. I looked around the table. You heard him. My uncle's will wasn't lost. It was buried. And every asset you thought belonged to Elliot? It's mine by law. Several directors exchanged shocked glances. One of them whispered, "Is this real?" From the corner, Marissa's feed streamed live to reporters through the earpiece relay. Every second of this confession bouncing straight into the world outside these glass walls. Elliot's composure cracked completely. He slammed his hand on the table. "You think this makes you a hero? You'll never prove the account exists." I smiled, leaning forward just enough for the microphones to catch it. I already did. The Keaton Trust wasn't deleted. It was reassigned. To me. The room erupted, chairs scraping, board members shouting, phones buzzing as the news spread faster than security could react. Elliot lunged across the table, his face twisted in fury. "You'll never prove it." He screamed again, but the truth had already left the building. If this story caught your heart, make sure to hit subscribe so we keep bringing you stories that dig deep into truth, guilt, and redemption. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We read them all, and your words keep us going. Dead men can't type passwords, but their legacy can. The bank lobby was silent except for the low hum of air conditioning and the quiet shuffle of polished shoes against marble floors. The same bank Elliot had used to erase my uncle's name now felt like the final vault between me and the truth. The manager, an older man with silver-rimmed glasses, led me to a private office. "You're here regarding the Keaton Trust, Mr. Keaton?" "Yes," I said, sliding the death certificate and the code I'd decrypted from the painting across the desk. "This authorization should clear the verification protocols." He adjusted his glasses, scanning the documents. "Where did you find this code?" "In art," I said. "The kind that hides numbers instead of beauty." He typed for several seconds, his fingers hesitant on the keys. Then the screen flickered, and for the first time, an account appeared. Keaton Trust. Restricted Legacy Access. He leaned closer. "This account hasn't been opened since the founder's death. It's unusual. It required 2 triggers. A confirmed death certificate and a decrypted passcode embedded in the company's founding artwork. Whoever designed this expected betrayal." "That sounds like my uncle," I said quietly. The progress bar crawled forward, 10%, 35%, 67%. My pulse synced with every percentage. Then the screen flashed green. Access granted. A flood of data filled the monitor. Transaction logs, ownership certificates, offshore statements. And there it was, available balance, 24,612,784. For a second, the room spun. I wasn't breathing. "He left it untouched," the manager whispered. "And look here." He pointed to a digital file labeled Grayson Holdings Original Shares. Co-founder, M. Keaton. My uncle hadn't just stored money. He'd stored the company itself. Every share, every right, every ounce of power Elliot thought he owned. Then, a printer behind the desk hummed to life, automatically spitting out a single sheet. The manager frowned and handed it to me. "Automatic ownership transfer letter, active upon verified heir confirmation." At the bottom, a single line glowed in fresh ink. "New registered owner, Noah Keto, NCEO, Grayson Holdings." For a moment, all I could do was stare. The man who fired me. The man who mocked me. The man who tried to erase my name had just been replaced by it. The manager looked stunned. "It seems, Mr. Keaton, your uncle left the system to correct itself." I nodded slowly, the weight of 5 years collapsing into one breath. "No," I said softly. "He left it to remember him." On the screen, the system refreshed one last time, and in bold letters it appeared, "Owner, Noah Keaton, CEO, Grayson Holdings." I didn't smile, not yet. Revenge was easy. Justice took patience. If this story caught your heart, make sure to hit subscribe so we keep bringing you stories that dig deep into truth, guilt, and redemption. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We read them all, and your words keep us going. I once worked for him. Now he works for my memory. The office smelled new, but the desk was old, the same oak slab my uncle built by hand when Grayson Holdings was still Keaton & Co. Back then, this company was about people, not power. Now it was time to make it that way again. I stood in the same boardroom where chaos once reigned, now lined with fresh plaques reading Keaton & Co., a legacy of integrity. The ink on the transfer documents was barely dry, but the first order of business wasn't profit. It was a purpose. The employees gathered quietly as I took the podium. "This company was stolen once," I said, my voice steady, "but it won't be again. From this day forward, 10% of our profits go into the Martin Keaton Foundation, for employees who believed loyalty wasn't just a word." They clapped softly at first, then louder, not because of wealth, but because of fairness. In a world built on exploitation, decency sounded revolutionary. Outside, Elliot's trial dominated the news. Every channel replayed his arrest, his desperate face, the fall of a man who once believed he could buy silence. The charges, corporate fraud, embezzlement, and the death of Martin Keaton were ruled as criminal negligence. Whoa, justice didn't bring back the dead, but it finally spoke for them. A few weeks later, I visited the cemetery. The sky was clear, the kind of calm that comes only after storms. I knelt beside my uncle's grave, setting down the leather briefcase he once carried to every meeting. "You were right," I whispered. "It wasn't about money. It was about meaning." For a long moment, I just sat there, listening to the wind brush through the trees. The company he built from dust had been rebuilt from truth. The balance sheet showed billions, but my heart counted something different: peace. I stood, brushed the dirt from my hands, and looked toward the horizon. Debt paid, Uncle. Loyalty isn't about who you work for, it's about what you work toward. If this story caught your heart, subscribe for more stories about truth, revenge, and redemption. And tell us where you're watching, Fro. Your story deserves to be heard.